If you're new here, you don't know this already. If you've been here for a while, you've heard me say it. I think that Virgo is one of the hardest signs in the zodiac, and I love to complain about Virgo. However, I can do it without feeling guilty because I have some strong Virgo energy in my own chart. And in readings, I work with a lot of people that also have strong Virgo. And the truth is that even if you don't have a lot of strong Virgo, you are still under the influence of our culture. And at least here in the United States, it is a very Virgo culture. It is filled with expectations that you show up, that you work really hard, and that you basically bend over backwards to make sure that everybody else is happy, taken care of, problems are solved, I's are dotted and T's are crossed. And you show up and you do it with a smile on your face every single day. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that because, as I talk about in the Virgo gifts episode of this series, we need Virgo. We need that energy that does carry us into doing the projects, doing the chores, etc. But the issue with Virgo, and I think the thing that is the most frustrating for all of us, is that it's really exhausting. And it also brings out this hypercritical part of us that is always nitpicking and looking at everybody else's mistakes and fault finding, especially with ourselves. And that's painful. Like, we're really tired from doing all the chores and getting all the things done. And we definitely don't need that critical voice in our head that's telling us that we did it wrong. We shouldn't have said that. We need to do better. So we're going to go into all things Virgo shadow. You guys love these shadow episodes. My name is Natha Perkins of Electra Astrology, and this is a talk that I gave on my podcast in season 5. Now I'm editing them, I'm releasing them on YouTube under a playlist of the same name, Astrology for Awakening. I'm also putting them on Star Narratives. No matter where you're listening or watching, make sure that you like or subscribe so that you can find these videos again. They are so helpful in understanding yourself. You will always get tidbits of information that make you say, ooh, I do that. And ooh, how can I change that? I don't like that. Or maybe it's a positive. I love that about myself. And I'm so psyched that I do it. So whatever it is, know that these episodes are well worth binging, watching from start to finish. Your sun sign does not have to be in these signs for you to get information, and you don't have to be a professional astrologer or an astrology master. This is information delivered in layman's terms so that you can learn more about yourself and hopefully heal something. That's the whole point of why I'm putting these videos out. All right, let's get started. And by the way, if you want to work with me privately, if you want to get into your own stuff in a really deeply psychological, spiritual, astrological way, come and find me at electraastrology.com. I have plenty of ways to work with me, and let's jump in.
Now, we all carry a strong Virgo shadow. I have worked with thousands and thousands of clients, and I also have my own felt and lived experience with this. And I have a lot of friends and family, and I see a consistent theme with this particular energy, and it all runs through us like a common thread. Virgo is where we are beginning to understand that it's not just about us, that we have an impact on the world, and that there are things that we want from other people. There are things that we want from ourselves, and we have to work to get them. And this is where Virgo comes in. So Virgo is the archetype of the helper. And if you are an Enneagram person, and really I should be talking more about Enneagram because I know there are a lot of you that listen that are studying Enneagram as well. This is very much an Enneagram 1 kind of archetype. But I would also say it fits the 2 and the 3 as well, because the 1 part of Virgo is the part that says there's a right way and there's a wrong way. And I want things to be the right way. And of course, the right way is very unique to each of us. We each have our own right way and our own standards that we're trying to uphold. And that's one of the places that this Virgo can get really tricky, because your standard might be really different than my standard. And we're both trying to be good and we're both trying to be right. And what happens when we don't meet? I'm expecting you to perform in some way so that I feel like life is going smoothly. You're expecting me to perform in the same way that you would if you felt that things are going smoothly. And That's part of the problem of being in a collective and expecting that everybody follow the same rules. And rules are definitely a Virgo thing. This concept over the last 4 or 5 years of virtue signaling, we've all heard that term, where there's a desire to show people how good you are and how you're following the rules and you're doing it the right way. And maybe on the other side of that, they're doing it the wrong way and they're not following the rules. And therefore, that positions you as being good and it positions them as being bad. So, this concept of being good versus being bad. And if you think back into your history at what being good versus being bad looked like in your family of origin, very likely being good was what was more desirable. Wanting to get the pat on the back, wanting to do things the right way to please mom and dad. Also, if you have any sort of organized religion in your background, and what I have found is that you don't even have to be raised religiously, but if there has been some strong religion that has been with your parents, your grandparents, your great grandparents, we do have those dogmas that are passed down to us, even if they weren't spoken to us when we were younger, we still feel it. And organized religion has a lot of strong Virgo themes running through it. This idea that you have to do it the right way, you have to please God. It's a judgmental God, and you don't want to mess up. And then that filters down into parenting. And a lot of the ways that people were trained to parent was that you had to have kids that were in line, that were listening to you. And that's what it meant to be good when you were a kid. Are you a good listener? Do you follow instructions? Are you getting the approval of the adults? And of course, on the other side of Virgo, which we'll talk about when we're doing the Virgo Pisces episode, is Pisces being the energy of God, of higher power, of the divine. But look at how easily it gets distorted when you're taking this beautiful energy, this Piscean energy of everything is perfect as it is. It might not feel perfect on our Virgo human side, but we know on the divine God side, the universal flow side, that there's usually some bigger reason for things that are happening. When we're looking at this axis and we're saying this is a really difficult axis, part of it is because Pisces is unexplainable. Pisces is totally without our control, and it doesn't fit into that same set of rules as Virgo does. We want things to be our way now on this timeline, and they better be right. So we look at how we get into this Virgo state of mind and how easy it is to feel like that's the right way. And so whether you have organized religion in your background, that's one way that you might come into embodying and internalizing this Virgo stuff. If you had parents who worked on like a point system, if you're good, you get this. If you're bad, then this happens. Schools are very right and wrong. You have to follow the rules. You have to walk in a straight line down the hallways, or else you get in trouble. Getting in trouble is really hard for that Virgo archetype because we want the approval. We want to do the right thing and we want to seem virtuous. And so we bring in this idea of our inner critical voice and we say, okay, well, maybe it's not so much that we're trying to appear virtuous to those outside of us, although my guess is that we probably are. We want to be good, but also that inner critical voice can be absolutely relentless. Virgo is the hardest next to Capricorn of the inner critical energies. We hold ourselves to very high standards. We hold others to very high standards as well. But ultimately, it comes down to how we are talking to and treating ourselves. So part of what becomes so shadowy and so difficult about Virgo, if we aren't doing it right, if we make a mistake, if we agree to go to a party and then at the last minute decide we're too tired and we don't go, then we are giving ourselves this whole dose of guilt and shame. We're worried that we're going to upset the host. They're going to be mad at us. They're going to think we're flaky. We're not going to get invited to anything again. If we make a mistake at work, it's like, oh my God, I've let my boss down. I'm so embarrassed. My client thinks that I'm an idiot. If I get some sort of criticism from my partner, it's like, oh my God, I screwed that up. I'm so bad. I mean, think of all of the places in your own life where when you have made little mistakes or you have changed your mind, or you have not scurried to get somebody else's approval. You've really had to disappoint somebody. Just think about the emotional impact on you and what you have dragged yourself through as you have ruminated and gone back and forth and felt bad about. Take a few deep breaths into that. When we start talking about these things, we start to get contracted in the body. We start taking shallow breaths because guilt and shame really is right below the surface for most of us. It's very easy to tap into those things when we feel that we have been quote unquote bad. So give that some breath and think about this concept of guilt and shame and how often it floods into your experience. Now, guilt and shame can also be a Scorpio thing, but with Scorpio, the way that we cope with it is usually by acting out in some way. We might use drugs, alcohol, some sort of numbing agent. We might blame other people for what was happening. With Virgo, the way that we cope with guilt and shame is by being good, being better, doing it better next time, saying yes to all the invitations, making sure not to change our minds next time. It also looks a lot like getting busy, taking more onto our plates so that everybody can see how good we are, how helpful we are, how many things we can manage. Busyness as a badge of honor. We've all seen that show up in our own lives. When I liken Virgo to the Enneagram 2, the Enneagram 2 loves to show up and be of help, always trying to make sure that everybody feels tended to, everybody's problems are solved. Think of the places in your life. They may be only specific places, maybe at home that you turn into the biggest Virgo, maybe at work. But think about those places where you consistently find yourself scurrying around, making sure that everybody's needs are met. I had an interesting conversation in one of my moon circles that I hosted this summer, and we talked about acts of service as a love language and how that was very Virgo in nature. Let me do things to prove how much I love you. Great. That's a great love language to have. And it can get a little bit sticky in there because when we are doing things to show our love, it easily slips into doing things to prove our worth. If I do enough for you, will you love me? Will you think I'm valuable? And I think that that's something that we all deal with this Virgo archetype. I want to be valuable. I want to be seen as good, as helpful, as virtuous. I want to be a good member of this family. I want to be a valuable member of this community. And therefore, I must show up, and I must give of myself. So where do you do that in your life? So let's say that you are not necessarily a doer for other people. Maybe that's not your MO, but maybe you hold yourself to these very high internal standards. Maybe it's that you push yourself to go work out, or you don't allow yourself to eat enough food, or you're a compulsive cleaner. It can take all forms of ways that we do not let ourselves rest. We have these structures in place, usually put into place by our own mind. And Mercury rules Virgo. Mercury also rules Gemini, which is the sign of the mind and how we take in information. And then Mercury, as a ruler of Virgo, has a lot to do with how we use that information. What do we do with it? Literally do. So we're doing. We are restricting, we're tidying, we're cleaning. We want to make sure that we look good, not just from the outside, but from the inside. Because that inner critical voice can be one of the most relentless, damaging things that we each have going for us. And if you're not aware of your own inner critic, then forget it. It's like having a dictator that is completely unchecked, that nobody is challenging. And so part of this self-awareness work, when you're exploring who you are and you're tapping into your spiritual tools, you're becoming more self-aware, is in understanding what your inner critic sounds like, what it will beat you up about, and what standards and rules it has for you, which is why it could look anything like I'm helpful to people. I'm relentless with my acts of service. I also hold myself to my own rules and I follow my own rules. And then we have the other part of Virgo, which is where we are looking at other people and saying, you need to please me. You need to have virtuous acts that agree with what my rules are. You need to prove that you're good to me. So I jokingly call this our inner Karen. So we've all heard the term Karen as somebody that's always wanting to speak to the manager. Now, think about that internal part of you that is always wanting to speak to the manager, that's judging, that's looking at other people and saying, oh my God, look at what they're wearing. Can you believe that she said that? They are going to vote for so-and-so. They didn't mow their yard. All of those little things. And we each have our like little things that really bug us about people. Our inner critic wants to go in and control them. We want them to please us. And we want them to fit into our roles, our rules of what is right and wrong. So this is why I say Virgo is just an incredibly sticky, tricky archetype, because it's going both ways. It's, I'm holding you to high standards. I'm holding myself to high standards. There are black and white rules and regulations. And when I liken Virgo to the Enneagram 3, that's the wanting to look good for everything that we do. So there's this comparison too. Well, I'm a good person because I mow my lawn every week. They're a bad person because they haven't mowed their lawn all summer. I'm a good person because I eat a healthy diet. They're a bad person because they're eating a bunch of crap. These are silly examples, but it's head-wrecking. Like, how do we get out of this Virgo stuff? How do we free ourselves from it? And it's usually so ingrained within us. It's happening on autopilot. So how do we get a handle on it? Because Virgo and the sixth house rule the nervous system, it really impacts our nervous system, going both ways. When we are running around, head down, trying to do all the chores, trying to do them right, it's draining. When we are sitting at our kitchen window, looking out at the neighbors and figuring out all the ways that they've messed up, it's draining. Inner critic beating us up, telling us we need to do more, it's draining. So essentially all of this over striving with Virgo, all of this black and white, right and wrong, just ends up being quite exhausting. So when we are trying to, as Brene Brown says, hustle for our worthiness, it doesn't work very well. We just end up hustling and we don't really feel that worthy, because once we cross one thing off the list, something else pops onto the list to take its place. So how do we work with the Virgo shadow is the question. And there's a few different ways to do that. Virgo is an earth sign. So in the same way that we look to each of the elements for the remedies, well, getting out into nature, getting out into the garden where there isn't a level of perfection. You're never going to have your garden be perfect. Anytime you're out trying to harvest, your hands are going to get dirty, and that's okay. You're going to have vegetables that have bugs eating them, and that's okay. So there's something that's valuable about being out in the flow of nature and really watching how nature has this beautiful way of being perfect and also being imperfect. You might find the most perfectly beautiful apple and you bite into it and it's too sour to eat. Or you might find an apple that has a big wormhole in it and you bite into the other side and it's the most delicious thing you've ever had. When you notice your nervous system going into overdrive and you can't stop, you can't slow down, you're trying to get your own approval, you're trying to get approval from everybody else, deep breath, go out into nature. See whether you can sit quietly and just observe the natural flow and the non-resistance of the natural world. The other remedy is through that lens of Pisces. And that is where we zoom out, we become quiet. We start to see that it's not about all of the effort. It is about trusting that if we put our focus on the things that feel good to us, there's going to be more flow. It's when we are head down doing all the things that we hate that it blows our nervous system out, because then we start to feel resentful about what we're doing. And if we don't get the approval for what we're doing, we don't have people that say, "You're such a good girl, you're such a good boy, so proud of you," then it's like, wow, what's the point? Now I'm really annoyed. So if you ever find yourself saying, "After all I've done for them," you know that you are on the difficult side of Virgo, that you have overextended yourself, you have crossed your own boundaries, you're doing things that did not make you feel happy in the first place, and that it's time to get out into nature. It's time to get quiet, tune into your spiritual practices, whether that's praying, journaling, pulling cards, just taking some moments of silence to connect in with your heart, as we learned about in Leo season, letting your heart guide you. And once you practice some of those things, you'll find that your attachment to rolling up your sleeves and doing all the stuff starts to get less and less. But again, Virgo can be very much an autopilot condition, where if you are not aware that you're doing it, then you're just doing it. You're just going all the time. For the rest of this week, your homework, if you so wish to take on some self-observation, is to become more aware of all of the things that you're doing on a daily basis, especially the things that fall under the category of, I have to do this in order to please my inner critic, or I'm going to get beaten up, or I'm doing this because I'm trying to get the approval of the people around me, or wow, I'm judging somebody else. And so we could put all of this under the umbrella of the inner critic. And I've suggested this before. I think it's a great practice to name your inner critic. If you want to listen to some more teachings on the inner critic, go back to the Capricorn episodes. If you name your inner critic, I once named mine Helen. I started to notice that Helen was just hanging out all the time. Helen always had something to say. Once I personified Helen, oh, Helen's here. I could also turn to Helen and say, thank you for trying to help, and I don't need your help right now. And it really does work. It really makes quite a difference. When your inner critic is no longer the unchecked dictator, your higher self begins to have more control and life begins to feel more balanced.
All right, thanks for joining me, you guys. I hope that you learned something, and I will see you all soon.